Good morning. Our president is detained behind the Atara checkpoint, and Angela is detained or kept withheld because of the sickness. And the occupation is trying to make us act online instead of on-site, but I propose to challenge that. We were late to start, and I will try to limit myself to the time. I am habitual to reading my intervention in order to limit myself to time. Kindly accept from me on-site and online the declaration on the positions of Muwatin Institute and its commitment to achieving justice for our people. This conference is held within its 30th copy, as we mentioned a decline in the human civilization, as indicated by the force that made Gaza a space for an internationally organized crime, and the criminal solidarity between the aggressors is unprecedented since World War II. We understand the difference between a criminal committing a crime and a criminal who belongs to a mafia or a gang committing a crime that was assigned to him by the gang, and a gang of criminals committing an organized, orchestrated crime. What we witness in Gaza is more of a guild of mafias who are committing a group of crimes and coordinating their roles. Some of them are waging the war, some of them providing military logistics, and the other are developing narrative about the aggressor as a victim, and others are waging the battle in oppressing the solidarity activists with the Palestinians. And some of them are building the legal and media narrative in order to legalize the Israeli aggressions and to extend the criminal act and to distance accountability. This is not the first time where the imperialist forces join hands and support each other in committing their colonial crimes. Yet, in Gaza, it has crossed a new threshold of international intransigence under the leadership of the United States of America and implemented by its major actor in our area, Israel. The nearest threshold to Gaza were the military policies led by German Nazis and the Japanese and Italian fascists before the World War II, which was documented in different agreements such as the German-Italian coalition and the German-Italian-Japanese that were Spain and other countries, puppet countries that Germany controlled, joined, and the Berlin coalition that was signed in Germany, Italy, and Japan right after the World War II. There is no space to address the similarities between these agreements and their confidential annexes and the undeclared coalition against the Palestine and its project. And I just suffice myself to mention that these agreements announced a value conflict, an ideological conflict, and an existential threat coming from the USSR at that time and from Britain sometime, from the United States for some time, and agreed to cooperate in combating that risk and to end the conflict militarily and through the media. This is what was written. I'm reading it, and I feel as if it was written today about Gaza. Whereas the other coalition, it announced a conflict and an existential threat coming from Gaza, and sometimes from Iran, Yemen, Sudan, Iraq, and others. Meaning that anyone who demands for freedom and sovereignty and self-determination, and they join hand in combating the ghost of freedom militarily, and added that with the force of the UN Security Council. Now we have Tony Blair, the godfather of the collapsed Third Way and supporter of the American war on Iraq and the leader of the Quartet failure. And it's coming like resembling Herbert somewhere. But this time he is mandated from the American presidency and the British government. The Security Council Resolution 2803 indicates about the satisfaction of the US administration about the program of reforming the Palestinian Authority. It states having conditions that have to be met before developing a path towards self-determination. And this is not different from the decision by the League of Nations when it mandated Palestine to the to Britain. This way, the international law has deteriorated and buried achievements that were achieved after World War II and cancelled the achievements and contributions that represent the majority of the populations of the world, including the non-aligned movement, in forming the international system and re-established the US leadership to the world and replacing the British Empire. Is it logical to believe that an international system like this one, is it capable of achieving peace and bringing back right or respecting the dignity of nations? There is no alternative for the world, for the free world, other than struggle to achieve an international system that is based on moral basis. The demand to reform the Palestinian Authority is a malicious demand because its specification is to reduce the level and ceiling of sovereignty. That is, have a limit for the dreams of the Palestinians and to achieve circumstances that are not conducive for any national authority to be legitimate, even if it was legal and elected, because the real objective for this reform is for that authority not to belong to our people, but rather to forces that are against our people. The results targeted from this reform and Trump's reform plan, if achieved, will push the Palestinian Authority to adopting a policy and implementing policies that contradict with the Palestinian public will. A matter will result in its will to check the public with oppressive means, as known in all the political regimes that are not accepted by their people. So this will produce anything but democracy. If the West that is demanding for reform, if it was worried about the Palestinian Authority and its jobs, such as serving health, education, and military administrative transparency and achieving the freedoms and liberties that require political transparencies, that those demanding for transparency cannot withstand. Yet, if they were true, then they wouldn't have left Israel to keep attacking, undermining the Palestinian Authority, sometimes from tax clearance, sometimes by blocking the crossings and closing the banks and other tools. Their effect is to paralyze the ability of any authority to meeting the demands of their nations. To return to comparing our situation with the situation of the world after World War II, that war ended by defeating the Nazis and having the Cold War. But today the Cold War became more heated, and war in Palestine is not over and will not be over before victory over the Zionism, that is fascism after the Nazism. What the free people in Gaza, so that they were threatened, and they had two options. Either they have coalition with the fascists, as Slovenia and Croatia did before World War II, and we saw their fate, or to indulge and to join the struggle against the fascism with all its forms, because they understood that Gaza today is just similar to Poland in 1939. That is, it's part of moving the fascist expansion in all areas, and there is no room for safety for anyone. Is what we are witnessing now, is it a history repeating itself? Unfortunately, yes, at least partially. the catastrophe is repeated and tragedy is repeated, and history cannot go back. But this means that the circumstances and the reasons that led to the both World War wars are here. The new liberalism has ended the socialism and the state of economy, and the arrangements that were developed by those who won the World War II are not valid anymore. Without this change, the world wouldn't have allowed the genocide of Gaza and continuation of genociding the West Bank. And with the aggression of a small country that is dependent on military support against 5 sovereign countries in few months in its genocide war against Palestine. The war on Gaza is not an introduction for an upcoming future, but rather a realization of a reality that materialized and a practice for models of imperialist forces during the fascist oligarchies, and also the experience of achieving the new liberal system in order to overcome its crisis with more pressure and oppression. New liberality ended liberalism, and now it's not accepting, and so the having several actors and several political factions is not a conditional, and also the civil and peaceful change of power and passing the power is not effective, because monopolies and their supporters in the security services and the armies are beyond that. And the opposition views became part of hate speech, and priorities have mixed, and the double standards became natural practice as in the current times, and the practice of hate speech became of higher voices and more heard. And disregard to civil freedoms became a new practice, and many people are not watching. And so many people now, they are fed up with darkness and started looking for light. In a nutshell, war on Gaza is a model on war for the remnants of liberalism and the faces that are resisting the fascist ascension. And this is an experience that can be repeated elsewhere in the world. And it is evident. And so there is no alternative but to face the reasons for this experience and to uproot its roots, because it's not limited to the extremist right-wing government in Israel that was designed to implement this, but it was not the one who created it. This doesn't mean that the Zionist establishment is not a partner to the design, but it's not alone. Things are not limited to Israel. Zionism was not built in Israel, and it's not limited there. And its hate to Palestinians is not because they are Palestinians, but because they are here, and because they challenge it, and because they stop in its way of expansion. And its allies across the world are also having enmity in Chile, in Iran, Rwanda, Sudan, Syria, China, Iraq, Venezuela, Vietnam, Kashmir, Cuba, Korea, Congo, Lebanon, Egypt, Nicaragua, Haiti, Yemen, and the list goes on, of the nations that were subject to aggression under the pretext of their danger. But the reason is the greed for their resources and their non-respect to the imperialist dictations. This is how the Zionist imperialism, and Pinochet in Chile was the first to start this new fascism in the mid-70s. And Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan, who was known as the white terrorism, and Wong Day-dim in southern Vietnam, that was supported then, assassinated by the CIA. and Mobutu Sese Seko in Congo, who implemented an American-Belgium coup d'etat against the elected president, Patrice Lumumba, and executed him. And they created Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And the narrative continues. But the summary of that, in the Palestinian case, that the Zionism will achieve the objectives of imperialist objectives in the region in order to take the remains or inheritance of the Ottoman state. And after World War II, the international British Zionism was used to take what the winners of World War II were unable to do, that is Palestine. After World War II, Zionism took the role of the policeman of the West in protecting the resources for the international capitalism, in spite of the socialism disguise that was clear later on. Yet the battle of victory against Zionism in its Israeli disguise is not the end of the war, but an initial step in the project in getting rid of the imperialist hegemony. Imperialism is not defeated yet, and as it's clear, it continues achieving achievements, such as it happened in the recent UN Security Council resolution on Palestine. Yet it is falling before its nations and suffering the conflict among its allies, where their people are demanding for their share from the international resources. And it's suffering in different areas across the world. Among these is the expansion of the international solidarity movement, whereas victory against imperialism has two conditions. First, to surpass them in force, organization, and resources. And second thing is to have a clear alternative for it that can establish a new international system. The sessions of this conference and the opening remarks will discuss the features of structural change in the international system and its crisis and the local and regional situation at the time of ascension of fascism and requirements to achieve change in the international system, and some of indications and tools for resisting the new fascism and starting with the international solidarity. The conference seeks to diagnosing the issue and recommending the treatment in order to producing it. In conclusion, allow me to welcome you all as speakers at the conference and participants in its discussions and monitoring for its activities. I start by welcoming our guests from outside the Arab world, from outside Palestine, from outside PSAT University, and from within the university, ending with our staff at Muwatin Institute and our other colleagues from other units in the university who worked hard to ensure success for this conference under difficult circumstances. In particular, I would like to mention, on behalf of my colleagues, our gratitude for those who did not hesitate to meet our invitation to participate in this conference, because they believe that enriching this discussion is a partial contribution to making a humble step forward towards human liberation. And this conviction is the thing that makes us believe that a better world is possible. Thank you.